Today's hearing will focus on income inequality, economic mobility, and opportunity in our country. We have 5 really distinguished witnesses. Dr. Jared Bernstein, the Senior Fellow at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Dr. Heather Boushey, Senior Economist at the Center for American Progress. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Boushey. I apologize. Heather Boushey, Senior Economist at the Center for American Progress. Ms. Sarah Anderson, Global Economy Project Director at the Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Scott Winship, Fellow at the Center on Children and Families at the Brookings Institution. And Dr. Mark Warshawski, a member of the Social Security Advisory Board. Dr. Warshawski, am I pronouncing that correctly? Thank you. Thanks all of you for being here. You all have really come here highly recommended. It's clear that income inequality, coupled with a lack of economic mobility and opportunity, is a significant challenge for our country. We've seen the rich getting much richer. Nothing wrong with that. We applaud success in this country. But we are concerned when we see the middle class have their incomes stagnate. And it has become increasingly difficult for middle and lower income Americans to move to the next rung on the ladder. The growing gap between the very wealthy and everyone else has serious ramifications for the country. It hinders economic growth, it undermines confidence in our institutions, and it goes against one of the core ideals of this country, that if you work hard and play by the rules, you can succeed and leave a better future for your kids and your grandkids. This first chart shows the growing income disparity between the wealthiest 1% and everyone else. This chart is really very dramatic. Going back to 1979, you can see what's happened. If you look at the 80% who are at the lowest income levels of our society, their incomes have gone up only modestly. They've largely stagnated. The top 1% have skyrocketed during that period. To help put these income levels in perspective, here is a breakdown of U.S. taxpayers by income group. We can see the average pre-tax household income in 2011 for the top 1% was $1.5 million. In comparison, the average income for the middle quintile was $45,000. Now, when my staff showed me this chart, I challenged it because I remember seeing repeatedly that the top 1% starts at about $370,000 a year. And that's true. That's where the top 1% starts. But if you look at their average income for the top 1%, in 2011, it was $1.5 million. We also have an economic mobility challenge in this country. This is a recent article that appeared on the front page of the New York Times. It's titled, "Harder for Americans to Rise from Economy's Lower Rungs." The article notes that Americans enjoy less economic mobility than their counterparts in Canada and much of Western Europe. One of the most significant factors blocking economic mobility is the rising cost of education. We've seen the cost of college education soaring. All of us who are grandparents know this. I compare what it costs for me to go to school, what it costs for my daughter to go to school, and what it's costing for our grandson to go to school, and it really is dramatic. And this is having an enormous effect on families across the country. The cost to attend a 4-year public college has risen from 12% of median family income in 1979 to 26% of median family income in 2009. So that is a doubling in the share of median family income going to pay for a typical 4-year public school. Higher education is simply getting too expensive for many middle and lower income families to afford. I think we are hearing that from families all across the country. I'm certainly hearing it from my constituents. Unfortunately, our tax system is contributing to income inequality. The Bush-era tax cuts in 2001 and 2003 were particularly notable for how much they were tilted to benefit those who are the most fortunate among us. If we look at who had benefited from extending all of the 2001 and 2003 tax cuts, we can see that millionaires would receive an average tax cut of about $100,000. Meanwhile, those making less than $100,000, constituting the vast majority of taxpayers, would receive an average tax cut of about $850. Those earning over $1 million, average tax cut of over $100,000. Those making less than $100,000, constituting the vast majority of taxpayers, would receive an average tax cut of about $850. The effective tax rate for the wealthiest in this country, the rate actually paid after factoring in exclusions, deductions, credits, and other preferential treatment, has fallen dramatically. In fact, the effective tax rate for the 400 wealthiest taxpayers fell from almost 30% in 1985 to 18.1% in 2008. This trend is highlighted in an article in Tax Notes last year. The article used IRS data to compare the average effective tax rates for the residents of one Park Avenue building in New York City, where the average income is more than $1.1 million a year, to the average effective tax rate for a typical New York City janitor. The data shows their average income about $33,000. The data shows the average effective tax rate for the building residents was 14.7%. The rate for the janitor was 24.9%. That's just not right. In a speech in Kansas late last year, President Obama summed it up well in talking about the reasons for income inequality. He said, and I quote, "This kind of inequality," excuse me just a minute, I'm still recovering from this, whatever Senator Sessions gave me.
I know you got it. We're glad you're back.
I'm glad to be back. The doctors tell me I'm no longer infectious, so I didn't want to impose this on others. I stayed away. The President said in his speech, "This kind of inequality, a level we haven't seen since the Great Depression, hurts us all. When middle-class families can no longer afford to buy the goods and services that businesses are selling, when people are slipping out of the middle class, it drags down the entire economy. Inequality also distorts our democracy. It gives an outsized voice to the few who can afford high-priced lobbyists and unlimited campaign contributions. And it runs the risk of selling out our democracy to the highest bidder. But there is an even more fundamental issue at stake. This kind of gaping inequality gives lie to the promise that it's the very heart of America, that this is a place where you can make it if you try." Yeah, I think the President has it about right. We need a society where everyone rises and falls based on their own hard work, skills, and ingenuity, not as a result of their family or the class that they were born into. We need to do a better job of removing barriers to economic mobility, such as the high cost of education. And we need to reform our tax code to make it fair and less skewed to benefit the most well-off.